We're going to start. And there are three types of people in this meeting today. I want you to think about which one you are. Group one. Some of you already have a podcast. Maybe it's growing. I can see some of those microphones there. Maybe it's plateaued. Maybe you're trying to figure out what to do differently here in the future. Group two. There's some overlap in this group with group one, but I know there are a lot of folks here who are really looking for this reason alone, and it's why you're here. You've heard that getting on a podcast is something you need to start doing, or start doing even more if you're already doing it. Like I said, some of you may have your own show, or you might not, but you all know that there's some leverage in being a guest, and you want more of it. That's why you're here. And group three, some of you are still deciding. Some of you have heard that, hey, podcasting is a smart move for B2B professionals, and you want to know if that's actually true for you specifically. So let's take a look here. I'm going to get this pulled up here for a poll. Bernie, you're putting that up there. There are the three types of people in the room. Which type are you on there? We've got podcast host. You have your own show, an aspiring guest. You want to be on those shows. Or maybe you're a builder. Maybe you're somebody who's here to get that first piece of technical know-how. All right, we've got, okay, aspiring guests, take it. Nobody has their own show here, which is very interesting. I think we'll have to make sure that we look into what's going on with that as we, okay, there is one actually, which is great. So we'll stop that and get back to the screen here. All right. Bernie, we can all see that, right? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Anyway, moving along. Sorry, double screen thing is throwing me a little problem here. Anyway, the next thing that I want you to take a look at here is I want to be upfront with something before we dive in. I am not going to spend the next hour here telling you that you need to start a podcast. We've got one person here already does, or that guesting on a show is a guaranteed path to leads and revenue. I've been doing this now for the better part of a decade. I know that is not how this works. What I am here to do is be straight with you about where the podcast world is in 2026, who it actually works for, and how you can show up in a way that builds something real in a time of a lot of AI and fakeness. So by the end of our session today, everybody here should have a clearer answer about where you belong in the podcast world, regardless of what group you're in, 1, 2, or 3, hosts, guests, or builders, and what your next move is going to look like. One slide too far. All right. In 2026, I am calling it the human rebound year. Let's talk about what's actually happening out there right now, because this context really matters. We've lost something over the past 60 to 70 years. We've lost what's called the monoculture. That is the media that everyone talked about with their friends, their families, and their coworkers after the weekend was over. It's water cooler talk. Now, for some of you, that monoculture was MASH. For some of you, it was Seinfeld, Friends. More recently, the MCU, Game of Thrones, and to a lesser extent, Stranger Things here in just the past few years. And the reason I'm mentioning that these bigger, more cultural phenomena are here is because right now we live in a time where those big centerpiece defining shows are actually having their lunch eaten by thousands, if not millions, of smaller pieces of media. Streaming shows, YouTube channels, Twitch streamers, podcasts, even little hobby communities that have formed online. Cultural fragmentation is such an important thing to look at in 2026. People are pursuing their own interests more than ever because they're looking for a human connection. When you see a video online now, how often do you ask yourself, is that AI? I do that for nearly every video I see. And not because I'm a skeptic. I mean, I am, but I'm searching for authentic content. I don't want to see what can get cooked up by a couple of computer chips strapped together and then thrown into a data center. I want to see something that a real human being can show me. We'll come back to that later, because in 2026, the most powerful differentiator is sounding unmistakably human. Knowledge is everywhere thanks to LLMs. What is in tragically short supply right now is wisdom. And wisdom only comes from people. Hence my calling 2026 the rebound year for humanity, because people, podcasts, companies, they're all realizing that they can't exclude the one critical factor that their customers, connections, and audiences want. And that is for people to be real. Everything else we're talking about today comes back to that. Okay. So a lot of you want to be guests. The big thing I want to tell you today is you're not under-talented, you are underdeveloped. Show of hands or hand emojis out there. How many of you folks have had a formal education on how to present yourself during a media opportunity? I'm talking about real sit-down practice with coaching and with a speech professional or somebody from the broadcast media agency, somebody who is a speaker coach or an organization dedicated to improving how you look when you're on camera or in front of people on stage. Raise those hands if you've had any training like this. Okay, actually, I'm a few more than I thought initially, which is good. But there, at the end of the day, a number of you haven't, and that's okay. The vast majority, again, have not had any formal training on this, and that is the number one issue with your podcast guest search. I would wager that every single one of you out there is the opposite of a boring individual. But to a podcast host and a producer, you might actually come across that way. The trick is you're not boring. You just haven't developed the right things to attract their attention yet. Your story isn't refined. Your pitch isn't built for the show that you're pitching. And how you actually show up when you're on camera and the mic is in your face, well, it just hasn't been sharpened. That's not a talent problem, thankfully. That's a development problem. And development is fixable. So, because this applies to most of you today out of any topic, we're going to talk about it first. You want to get on more podcasts. How do you do it? Number one thing you can do is be a better storyteller from the get-go. I get dozens of podcast pitches a week in my inbox, and do you know what happens to most of them? They go right into the spam or delete box, except for the ones I save for research. But legitimately, I barely read them. And you might say to yourself, Rob, how do you know they're not right? Or how do you know they're not a good pitch or not right for your show? The answer is very simple, because they're generic. And oddly enough, they are way too long, oftenly. When your goal is to pitch a show, your goal is to pitch the right show, you need to do the following. Number one, you need to make life easy for the host by identifying a unique angle that you have that benefits their audience. This is a non-selfish thing. Number two, you need to give them a tiny glimpse of who you are, that little sprinkle of what makes you Laney or Jeffrey or Munya or Chaim. Help them understand who that person is in just a brief fragment. And then number three, help them plan an episode that will resonate with people who listen to them on a regular basis. Here's the trick, though. You've got to do it in under 150 words. And that last piece is the number one thing that makes me hit the dump button on a pitch. People who want to be my guest or agencies representing people who want to be guests on a show show up and they give me 300 reasons why I should have them on. As a host and a producer, I don't need that. What I need is one, maybe two, ultra compelling, audience fitting reasons to have you on. The ultra compelling part is the key. And we're going to show you how to craft an ultra compelling story here in just a few minutes. But first, we're going to talk about what makes a bad guest. Part of being ultra compelling is not being a bad guest. Now, that is a super vague thing I've just said. Well, don't be bad, right? Well, okay, well, how do I be good? Let's look at a few of the finer points to consider when you're hanging your hat out there. Bad guests don't engage. They're there to be selfish. We talked about this just a moment ago. They're trying to appear on podcasts with a mission. You might have a mission similar to this yourself right now. I want to promote my new book. I just launched a course and I want to sell it. My business coach said I got to get on more podcasts and spread the great gospel of XYZ company and what we can do for our customers. These are all selfish goals, and they are the number two driver of what makes you unable to guest on a podcast because hosts see right through that, and it's an instant turnoff. So as you pitch, think about what I said about the 150 words. Make it about the host and the show, not you. Let's talk about a few more things here. We, of course, live in 2026. And I mentioned earlier, the most human take is what people are looking for, because that means if ChatGPT or Claude can say it, it's not going to get any resonance with hosts. One of my podcast producer colleagues gave me the greatest question and answer hook for 2026 a few weeks ago when we caught up for some coffee. I asked him, Ryan, how are you coaching your hosts and your guests this year? And his response was this: coach your hosts to ask questions that only a very specific guest can answer. Coach your guests to tell stories that are completely unique to them. Let's expand on that a little bit. He went on to tell me about a show he was working on that had a goalkeeper from a European soccer club as a guest. One of the host questions to this footballer was the extent of, you blocked what would have been a game-winning kick in a national match when you knew that ball wasn't going in the net and it was going to win you the championship. What was going through your mind? Now, that's a powerful question, and it's something that only this specific person could answer. And it's a question that stabs directly into a deep emotional response from him. Hosts, I know there's one or two of you in here, you need to start asking this kind of question. And guests, you need to find the things in your life that elicit a deep emotional response from you, especially if it's related to what you do for a living and your business. Another amazing example I had a few weeks on my show, on my own show, was I closed out an interview with a gal, and I decided to ask her one more thing, this one more nerve-striking question. I knew she was from humble beginnings in West Virginia. I asked her how she thought her younger self would feel if she could meet her future self right now. My guest took a moment and with some very joyful tears in her eyes gave me the best, most emotional answer I've ever had the honor of receiving as a podcast host or across any of my media career throughout radio and television and things like that. And through her tears, she told me that her younger self would have been so proud because things were really tough growing up. Her younger self would see that she'd eventually make it and become a success, and that all the hardships, the hard work, the hard times of getting to this point would be worthwhile. Now, tapping into a story like that, that's going to be what is going to get you on a show. I am not telling you to make your guests cry if you're a host, nor am I telling you to just go and bawl on a show if you're a guest. But what I am telling you is that when you're on a podcast stage, when you're the guest, I'm telling you that you need to have the humanity in your answers shine through, because that is what will make a difference. Don't just tell me you won 7 awards without giving me the whole story. Build that emotional structure. Show that something was at risk. Human beings love drama, and AI is very bad at making good drama. Now, in our next segment, I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we make good drama as a guest. But before we do that, there's a few other small things I want to mention about what makes a bad guest and how you can fix them. For those of you that host shows, or that maybe you've been on or listened to a show if you are a guest, what are your biggest pet peeves that make for a bad guest? Pop those in the chat underneath Bernie's question right there. I will read a few of those as they come in. I'll share a few of my own as well. Ooh, I love that one, Allison. Back when you were hosting guests, you hated it when they didn't review the questions you had prepped. A lot of folks send questions ahead of time. Gotcha. Mike hasn't had any bad experiences yet, droning on and on. Brevity is a very good thing sometimes. So let's take a look here All right. Bad guests. Some of my pet peeves, they one up the hosts. The trick here is to make each other look brilliant. If you're going on a podcast, the goal is to not one up the host. Sometimes, even if you have the perfect story to follow on something, let it go. That's a conversation for a future time. A couple other things here. Bad guests go on too long. Mike, you nailed it. You nailed it. Bad guests go on too long. If you've ever jokingly said, I ramble sometimes, like I used to, get working on not being that way anymore. Ask your partner or someone else who knows you really well to have you describe your favorite fictional universe to them in detail while one of you starts a stopwatch. If you can't get through a complete overview of Star Wars, The Wheel of Time, Game of Thrones, Warhammer 40,000, whatever you're into, in under 4 minutes, you need to tighten up. Now, admittedly, some of those universes are a little harder than others to get through in 4 minutes, but you get the picture.
Hey, Rob, I want to pause it 1 second. Your
Yeah.
slide isn't changing.
Oh,
there you go.
There we go. Thank you. Oop, let's go backwards. Thank you very much, Bernie. Anyway, bad guests talk too fast. Back onto things here. I'm a fast talker, but when I'm presenting and when I'm on the mic, I'm making this conscious effort to slow down. You don't have to be the DMV sloth from the movie Zootopia, and you can always vary your pace, as you found me doing so in this presentation. But if you're flying through words at 100 miles an hour, two things are going to happen. One, no one's going to be able to understand you. And two, more importantly, you aren't going to be able to think fast enough to keep creating a conversation that flows. It's going to be ums, ahs, things like that, filler words, as your brain struggles to keep up with your mouth because it's moving too fast. All right, those are out of the way. Let's talk about how you can craft some of the stories that get you a yes from hosts. We've got a 4-part framework here: quest, decision, consequence, and reflection. So here's how this next segment's going to go. I'm going to tell you a story twice. First, I'm going to tell you the bad version. Then I'm going to tell you the version that I would actually submit to somebody if I were on their show and they were interviewing me. I have a feeling you'll be able to tell the difference. So here goes the first version. If somebody was asking me about a great success in my career, I would say something like, well, early in my career, I was responsible for a customer service team and a contact center. We won 7 Stevie Awards for our contact center work. It was a strong recognition of what we built and the company culture I worked at, which was really great. Okay. Would you book that guest if that was his response? It's a pretty generic story. I'm thinking ChatGPT could write something way better than that without even trying. So the framework that gets you from version 1 to version 2 is as follows. The quest. What are you trying to accomplish? You have to set a mission. When you get asked a question as a guest, you have to prepare these kinds of things. You have to set that mission, give it stakes. Without a quest, you don't have a story. Number 2, the decision. What did you actually choose to do that makes you unique? What would other people not do? This is the real meat of what you're doing as a podcast guest and is what is going to make other people want to talk to you in the future after you get on a few shows. A lot of guests fall really flat here. They go, yeah, we worked really hard, instead of explaining what they specifically did. The goal here for pitching shows is to show them about you what is unique about your perspective that other people's don't have. You have to use some of that 150-word budget on that. Step 3 is the consequence. What changed? It's not just we won or the team went to Vegas or, what grew? What shifted in the culture of your company if it's on a business show? What changed in the world? And what could you do that you couldn't do before? And last but not least, the reflection. What did this teach you? What is the lesson for the listener? This is where your experience becomes authority. This is where you develop a term that I don't necessarily love, but thought leadership. You can't skip this part. This is the part that makes a host want to keep talking to you and draws a listener deeper into a conversation that you're in. Now, if your story doesn't have a quest, a decision, a consequence, a reflection, it is not a story. It's just a bullet on a resume. So, using this framework, we're going to refine this into something a little bit different. Here's version 2 of the very same story. Same question, Rob, tell me about a successful time in your business career. Okay. Well, let's flash back to when I was working at a company called Delta Defense. It was a specialty firearms insurance company. My VP gave my team a challenge. He wanted us to find something we could legitimately call ourselves award-winning for. And this wasn't supposed to be a vanity play. We had actual standards that we had to uphold, but it was going to mean something real if we could back it up to our customers. And so we started looking at this thing called the Stevie Awards, and it was basically the Oscars for contact centers. And the thing about the Stevies is that you don't just show up. You have to write an essay. You have to put this detailed submission out that judges from across multiple industries, people who have never heard of you or your company, they don't know your culture, they don't know your people, they need to read this and evaluate whether or not you are one of the best in the country. So my job was to spend hours and hours on that submission. And my goal wasn't to list metrics. My goal was to make our company culture bleed through that page. I wanted somebody from a completely different industry to read it and say, wow, that's how a contact center is supposed to work. We won 7 Stevie Awards over the next 3 years. And that meant the thing that meant the most to me wasn't the hardware. It wasn't the trophies that sat in the lobby. It was that my company sent my colleague, Caitlin, who was our top performing rep, her supervisors, and the entire team to Las Vegas to attend the gala on the company's dime as a recognition of what they built together. I didn't get a ticket, for the record, but watching the team that did the real work get recognized the right way, that was the whole point. What I took from that experience was this: recognition is leveraged when it's earned, and awards are tools, not trophies. So the submission, the story, the craft of translating what your culture actually does, that's what wins, and that's one of my best business wins of my career. If your story doesn't have that decision, quest, consequence, reflection, all 4 were present in there, again, it's just a resume bullet. And I have a feeling you'll agree that version 2 of that story, a little bit better than version 1. All right. So we've talked about a lot of how you are going to be a good guest and how you show up once you're invited on a show. But we got to get you in the door first. And I have a feeling you're like, Rob, you put the cart before the horse here. Don't worry, we're switching them back around. To do that, we're going to introduce you to a concept that is actually 100% unique to me, and I'm actually working on having a trademark right now, which is really cool. It is called Guest and Host ELO, and it's a good way to look at where you should hunt for guesting opportunities and where, if you have your own show, you should hunt for guests. Now, you might be asking, what on earth is ELO? Well, ELO is a competitive ranking system. And if you play chess or if you play video games, that might be a familiar term to you. But in a nutshell, it basically prevents the following. If you are in a league, if you will, you can't win the World Chess Championship by just dominating folks who have barely played the game before. Conversely, it keeps beginners safe from being just mercilessly stomped into the ground by people who are really good at the game. Podcast guesting works this very same way. Every single one of you has an invisible guest score, whether you know it or not. And it's not about how smart or talented you are. It's about where you are in your development and what your track record looks like and what level of show you're actually ready for. And we're going to talk about those here on this slide in just a moment. So in order to illustrate this, I want you to take a look at it from the perspective of a musician. Over 30 years ago, a very wise woman had a little boy, and that little boy was struggling with piano lessons. He fought her the whole way on practicing. He wanted to be a very good piano player when he grew up, but the concept of practicing and being bad at an instrument to get good at an instrument was very lost on him at the age of 10. One day, after a particularly frustrating session with his mom, she sat him down and told him a very hard truth about being a musician. You got to play a lot of dive bars before you play Carnegie Hall, kid. Thanks, Mom. Here's the thing, though. My mom's right. Just like a musician, you have various venues that correspond to the level of podcast that you need to go look for. Let's go through them here on the chart. So dive bars. I'm from Milwaukee. We got a lot of these. These are shows that have under 300 downloads per episode. The host is likely flying solo or close to it. They're probably actively looking for guests. Every interview-based podcast generally has a line of about 42 people who want to be on it right now, which is insane. But they don't have a booking team. These are small, scrappy venues. Step up to indie venues. The top 10% of shows, we're going to show you how to find that a little bit later. These folks have a developed niche audience. They do show some selectivity in their guests. It's not necessarily a walk-on, if you will. Next level, regional stages, the top 5%, structured guest selection shows up here. You probably have to have a referral to get on here. Cold pitching probably doesn't work. And then you have national tours. Hey, significant brand recognition that I recognize that are needed at the top. And of course, Carnegie Hall. You're playing with the big boys, likely invitation only. So in looking at each of these stages, you're going to see where you likely have to start. And it's at the bottom. Or top, as the slides laid it out, if you will. But you're going to have to find those dive bars. And some of you with developed followings may be able to step up a rank or two. Maybe you can get into the indie venues or the regional stages. But if I look at myself honestly, I may be able to go as high as step 4, but I would have to be exceptionally lucky and have an amazing connection there to even think about that. So more realistically, what I should be doing is I should be playing a mix of tiers 1 and 2 and leveraging those to get tier 3 opportunities. Bernie, you've got another poll for me there. Let's have folks here. What level do you think you're at? Be incredibly brutally honest with yourself. Are you dive bars? Can you maybe play some indie venues? Maybe you can play a regional stage. Or maybe there's somebody here who's up a level higher than everybody else, and that's awesome. All right, you know what? We got a crew for the dive bars, and there is somebody out there who's able to play a regional stage. I'm proud of you for that. You should be like big time pat on the back for that. If that is you being 100% honest with yourself, keep her going. That's amazing. Excellent. Now, as we move more towards this, some of you might think, hey, okay, I'm honest with myself that I am in dive bar land, but I could pitch a regional stage. Sure, why not? Well, pitching above your ELO might seem really ambitious and might seem like a cheat code, but you're going to need receipts from the dive bars in order to prove that you can actually perform at a higher level venue. Again, think like a musician. I mentioned I'm from Milwaukee. That's home of Summerfest, one of the world's largest music festivals. There are hundreds of bands and acts on stage every single year, but those bands only got there by playing the hundreds of smaller venues and bars around the city and state first. Think with me for a second. What does a new musician usually get in compensation when it comes to their performances at a dive bar? A lot of times it's a small bar tab and maybe a cheeseburger. You have to go into these lower level shows as a guest with that mindset, that the payoff may be a couple Miller Lights and a cheeseburger. But here's the thing. Even the humblest of venues can host someone who is an incredible performer, and that is especially true in podcasting. And that's how you start to grow your guesting chops. Dive bar level podcasts are a practice field, but you should be taking them incredibly seriously because the endorsements and relationships you start to build here at level 1 are going to be the foundation for what you do years from now. And when you're further up the guest ladder, those relationships and those receipts from past performances are going to be what you use to buy your new ticket, basically. The other piece of the puzzle here is keeping those receipts. If someone makes content from an interview with you, start a running document on where that content can be found. Get the links, get the images and the videos and the short form and everything like that, and organize it well so you don't lose track of it down the road. And you can show it off when somebody asks you, well, what kind of shows have you been on? You have a document where you can say, here's where I've been, here's what I've said, and here's an easy way to consume it without having to go wade through, a 45-minute podcast. Okay. So we talked about where you are. Let's talk about booking agencies. Some of you might be saying, you know what? I don't need to pitch myself on shows. I've got a shortcut. What if I just get somebody to put me on a podcast? You've probably seen this pitch. I get it 8 times a week. Dear podcast host, I love your show. I help people increase downloads by over 400% or revenue by over 400%. Let me know if I can be a guest. Like I said earlier, those get craned out of my inbox and put into my research folder on terrible podcast pitches, and they're often left unread. Now, that pitch on the screen here is a slightly condensed version of what I usually get, but the source is usually the same. It comes from a booking agency. And you may have had this cross your mind in the past. Well, I've got some spare money. I should have someone else get me onto shows to fill my guest pipeline for me. Let me get out there and just have somebody do the hard work. Now, that is a valid strategy, and booking agencies often have a very legitimate role for a certain type of person who is looking to get on more podcasts. Specifically, if your time is worth $500 an hour or more, and you need a high volume of pitches and you can't retask one of your sharpest admin people to go prospecting for you, go ahead. Book a quality guest booking agency. The benefits will obviously outweigh the financial output and the diminished relationship capacity. One thing to keep in mind, though, booking agencies are trying to get you on shows, and they're trying to get their customers on your show, if you have one. And while they'll make an effort to find good fits, they're not necessarily incentivized to make you exceptional in your niche. Those are two different things. Additionally, they aren't responsible for your quality as a guest or the quality of guests that they bring to you. You want to be known as someone who brings the rain when you're guesting. You want to own that guest relationship. And when you do that from the start, you have far more leverage when it comes to getting feedback on how you performed as a guest and asking that host for a referral to guest somewhere else. Finally, when it comes to guest booking, you're not too good to do this yourself at nearly any level but the highest level. Even if you are running a team of 20, the asks that you can make and the relationships that you can build from being the primary point of contact are a major benefit in your guesting search. So let's find out how to find the right shows. Those of you without shows or hosts who are looking to guest as well, where are you finding these shows to be on? Step one is easy. Your own network. Scan LinkedIn before you do anything else. Who hosts a show? Who's been a recent guest? Who's sharing episodes? Who's interacting with podcast content? Who do you know who could potentially introduce you to a host? This beats the living daylights out of a cold pitch every single time. Warm intros beat cold pitches. Don't overthink this. Get into LinkedIn for 20 minutes and just find out where your network is at. Now comes the more interesting piece of the less obvious, if you will, here. The manual niche search. Don't rely, when you're looking for podcasting, guesting opportunities, don't rely on searching things just like marketing or business. Because you can go into Spotify or Apple and type those in. You will get a truckload of podcasts, which will give you a good idea of what kind of shows you may want to start on, but you're going to get buried in opportunities you can't win because those are all high-ranking podcasts, the top 1% of shows, national stages. What you want to do is you want to search the niche version of what you do. Spa marketing, bar business coach, med spa CEO, smart pizza parlor marketing. The more specific you are, the better. I want to take a quick moment to talk about that smart pizza marketing one that I mentioned. This is actually a real show, and I stumbled on it when I was searching for niches for myself about 2 years ago. Now, again, I'm not in the pizza business. It's one of the most niche shows I've ever come across, though. And if you serve that space, pizza parlors and pizza parlor owners, getting on that show is critical because every listener is the exact right person you want listening to you. I did a little digging, and Smart Pizza Marketing is a top 1.5% of podcasts show. That means it gets somewhere around 3,000 downloads a week. And this dude has done this over 600 times as of earlier this year. It's really clear to me that this show has captured an audience, and it could fill a small concert venue or a small minor league sports stadium. And it's all to talk about pizza and how to sell it. If that's not a niche, I don't know what is. You as a guest should be searching for shows just like this from the get-go. Yes, top 1.5% is almost a national stage, But if you can find the dive bar or indie version of this to start and then pitch that show, that is a huge win. Play the dive bars first in the niche markets that fit your ideal customer profile. It's important to know how the back end of search works without any tools so that when I show you this next step, you're going to understand what's going on and can accelerate this as well. Excuse me. So there are two tools I want to take a look at today with you. Listen Notes, which is a podcast search engine, and Rephonic, which is also a paid podcast search engine. Again, Listen Notes is free, Rephonic is paid. They let you filter things by category, episode count, filter, release frequency, and even sometimes guest booking signals. Again, Listen Notes is free, and I've done extensive research and work with it, not just for myself, but for our very own podcast Pitch Lab course. You might also be able to bring in your favorite AI to accelerate this for you. Ask your favorite AI the following prompt. And if you've never used the AI before, that piece at the bottom there, give it the context and things like that. But, I'm looking to guest on podcasts and want to find small niche programs where I'd be a strong fit and could actually get booked. Based on what you know about me and my business, give me 8 to 10 specific podcast subcategories or verticals. Again, we're going into the niches here that I should guest on. And again, you're clarifying for the AI, not broad topics, and then giving a one sentence fit, if you will. And I'm glad you liked the prompt, Allison. This was for you. So this tool right here is something that's going to get you on the road to starting things when your manual search either runs dry or it's going to give you more clarity on what your manual search already confirms. Don't always lead with the tools. Lead with what you know your primary niches are, and then let the tools go a little bit wider and a little bit deeper. So if you want to go deep on this, the full methodology of how to map your ICP to the right show type and how to position your pitch for kind of the entry level, that's what my Pitch Lab is built for, but we're going to come back to that at the end. All right. This is probably the hottest take I've got of today. If you won't promote the episode, don't take the mic. I have a rule, and it's about growing your own audience in 2026. When I guest on a podcast, unless there is a very good reason for me not to, I post about it. I feel really strongly about this, and I'm going to potentially give you again, like I said, the hottest take of the day when it comes to guesting here. If you're not willing to promote the episode you appear on almost excessively, don't take the booking. With limited exceptions, and there are some, you shouldn't be guesting if you're not going to share it. Here's why. When a host puts you on their show, they are giving you their audience. They are lending you their credibility. They are giving you a stage that they built. And they took the time and the effort and consistency to fill the audience that's watching that stage. And then you go and you don't share it with your own network. That is so disrespectful. I firmly believe that one of the rudest things in business is being given a stage and not thanking a host by sharing it. So if you want to be on more podcasts, show that you actually give a crap about making the shows you appear on bigger. An engaged guest who takes the time to help host grow their audience is a very rare find. And I can tell you, it is one of the easiest ways to my heart as a host and a producer. If I'm seeing you promoting past shows that you've been on out on LinkedIn or Instagram or wherever it might be, I want to invite you along for the ride because that is showing me that you're going to do the same thing for me. That's a great value add in this case. And I honestly think it is the minimum standard of being a guest. It also has the double benefit for you as a guest of alleviating your social media calendar load. If you're like me, I don't have a social media person. You get to a point where it's like, oh man, what am I going to post on LinkedIn? Well, if you've got these podcast appearances, that is certainly something you can take a look at going for yourself to, kind of fill that social media calendar. Hey, if each one of those podcast appearances gives you 2 to 3 social media assets, short video, quotes, or even the episode itself, you've got, half your social media calendar done because your social media post numbers for the month might only be 12 to 15 posts. That's a significant load off your plate while making yourself more visible. And then, of course, if there's short video involved, that's usually the big thing that you want to be doing. You put that out there, get that short video on LinkedIn. And oftentimes I've found short video leads into our next talking point. And those are super fans. They are the audience that you can't skip. So we're going to do a little bit of homework here. This segment is primarily for people who host a podcast. There are a couple of you out there. I want to talk about the things that actually determine whether your show grows or stalls. And it's not necessarily the video quality or the audio quality. It's not how your show's configured. It's the super fans. And I'm not talking about your mother. Your mother's a wonderful woman, but she doesn't count for this. One of the biggest mistakes podcast hosts make, especially early, is they look at their engagement numbers and they count support from people who don't matter in this case. Every podcast I launch, episode 1 gets hundreds of downloads. Episode 2 gets like a 20th, or not 20th, probably about a fifth of that. And hosts freak out. They go, what's going on? Well, you got listens from people who just like you. They're not fans of what you do or anything like that. They like you, but they're not into what you do on a regular basis. Courtesy listens is what I call these usually. A super fan is a second degree stranger who showed up on a platform for, of their own accord. They engaged on their own and they have no reason to be there except what you're doing is actually resonating with them. So I have this thing called the 7 reaction rule, which is where for social media posts, I start to look for these super fans. When you post a piece of content, like a LinkedIn post, an episode clip, and you get to that 7 reactions level, take a look at that in your own feed of what you've been posting. Take a look at how many people are strangers, people you've never interacted before. Take a look at how many of them are your ideal customer profile, people who become a client or an advocate. And did any of them leave like a big long comment? Not, great post, like that's worthless. But did they actually show that they listened to and thought through your content? That's your data. That's your signal. 7 reactions from the right people is worth multiple times more than just, people who are your friends liking your stuff. When you find these people, the next step is non-scalable. And I know nobody here wants to hear that word, but it is true. You respond to that person, you go look at their profile, you pay attention, you engage with what they're putting out into the world, and you make them feel seen. That's not something you can automate. It's something you do because you actually care. So what happens over time is these people become engaged, real followers. They start to do something different. They defend you in comment sections. They share your stuff without being asked. They refer you into rooms you didn't even know existed, and they become your podcast's flywheel. You cannot buy that. You can't shortcut it. You can build it one genuine interaction at a time. Building your super fan base takes a ton of time, and it's really manual. So if you're trying to scale that before you build it, though, it's not going to work. After this webinar, I want you to go to your most recent LinkedIn post where you made content and find out if you have a super fan lurking there. Look for a post with between 7 and 15 reactions and see how many of those reactions came from folks who aren't the people who are like obligated to like your stuff. We have a couple members of my team here in this webinar right now and a number of people I would call very close friends. You guys don't count for me. I love you to death, but right now I'm looking for those people who are new to this. I found this with one of my posts, and it's like as close as I could get to the 7 reaction rule. It had 7 reactions when I started at 12 as of now. 10 of them are from people who are too close to be able to be called super fans. But 2 of them are people who follow me because they're here for the knowledge that I'm giving, and also folks who, as where my content direction is going, I can serve them with my business. There's one in particular I'm going to be reaching out to personally, and not just thanking her straight up because she's been participating in my content. She's just a wonderful human being, and she's just been there the entire time. There's no ulterior motive for me on that. There's no pitch. It's just going to be honest gratitude to her. And that is how you build super fans. When I thank her later today, I'm going to be setting a calendar reminder for a few months down the road. Make time for your super fans. And speaking of time, we are almost done here, but I'm sure there's a few questions out there, and then we'll close out with one more segment for you who have absorbed all this great information, but still aren't quite sure if podcasts are for you. So we're going to pump the brakes here, and if you've got questions, Bernie, let's put 4 minutes on the clock here, and I'll try to answer as many questions as I can. If you have those questions, pop them in the chat, folks. And Allison, you don't have to stop commenting on my stuff. So we'll get going here for just a little bit. Let's go backwards. Sorry about that. Good deal. All right, wait over another hot second here for a question or two to come in. Recommendation on increasing engagement. Good question, Mike. I'll take that one. This one is tough because it's hard to start from zero. One of the hardest things to do is, create your first fan. You almost never start from a place of 0 to 1. 0 to 1 is the hardest thing here. I would say increasing engagement would be asking a question to your folks on your post. I do that oftentimes with my own LinkedIn posts to say, hey, what was your favorite part of this? What was one big key takeaway you had? Oftentimes, you see YouTubers do this all the time. Tell me what you thought about whatever thing they're talking about in the comments. That kind of call to action is a great way to increase engagement. But then the other flip side of the coin, Mike, is that when people actually do interact, you have to interact back because you have to give them that back and forth here in this case. So I think we've got at least one actionable there for you. I'm going to grab Allison's question here. Struggling to know on what keywords are specific enough when searching. How do you figure those out? I know you are a fabulous AI prompt wizard, Allison. That is where you will bring in your favorite AI and you will have it help you refine and refine and refine that to say, hey, this is what I do. This is how I do it. I need keywords that are niche. I need things that are very narrow. And you can even ask your AI. I had the incredible experience this past weekend of a project that was completely unrelated to podcasting where I asked Claude to do some really deep research on me on something, and I was providing it. It was almost like a fire. I was feeding the fire pieces of kindling at first, but eventually Claude was able to make this into something that was just an incredible article and document for myself and my family here as we tried to learn about a classic vehicle that we own. And it was actually found some incredible stories from it as I kept on feeding it little tidbits. So I would say, Allison, start with the keywords that you know are yours, and then bring it to the AI and say, hey, I need more like this. What other things can I feed you? And maybe you need to workshop that phrasing for your AI. What other things do you need to know from me, AI, to help you give me more and drill outside of this? So there we go. All right, I will take one more here because it looks like we have about a minute left. As a guest, how do you coach the host to co-publicize the podcast? Yeah, to bring some of their fans to your podcast. Yeah, if you're doing like a guest swap, that's something where you want to do almost like an agreement, I would say, is if you're setting something up like that, and again, great question, Annette, is to say, hey, I'm going to do this and share your schedule of promotion with them and say, hey, this is what is going on. We are posting on Monday, Thursday, and Friday. When are you posting? And hold them to it. If they don't post on Tuesday when they said so, if they said they're going to post Tuesday morning and it's Tuesday at 4:00 and you haven't seen that post, ping them, call them on it, whether it's a DM or an email or whatever it might be. Hey man, you said you were going to post this morning. What gives? Keeping people accountable is I think one of the really big things here. All right. I'm going to put a bookmark on that question from Jeff here, because we're going to get back into this where not everybody should start a podcast potentially. Oh my gosh. Should we? Shouldn't we? We got to keep this moving. We're going to be hanging out afterward here for the event, and we'll, as we answered a few more of these questions. And of course, I will be providing a meeting link for everybody out there if you want to get some time on my calendar. So this last segment is for the curious builders in the room, which is most of you. I want to be honest with you in a way that most people talking about podcasts aren't talking about it. I used to firmly believe that every single human being needed a podcast. Like 2021, I was so deeply into this. I genuinely thought it was one of the tools that was right for any business-to-business professional who wanted to build authority. I do not believe that anymore. Podcasting is the right move for people at some stages of their business and at some stages of their career. For others, there are better uses of that time and energy. Things are going to drive you directly where you need to go. And I'll tell you something else, because helping to someone decide to not start a podcast can still be a win. because that's what I want someone to tell me if the situation was reversed. So with that in mind, let's go over a bit of a comparison chart here of all your, for all you pod curious people. If you're part of group 3, start a podcast only if you want long-term authority in your space and you're thinking in years, not months. Many of you know relationships aren't built overnight. They take time, they take nurturing. You need to be able to play a lot of dive bars and meet a ton of interesting people before you get to the big time. Start if you are genuinely enjoying conversation and you're good at it, or you're willing to practice and get good at it. Just like the piano for me, one of the biggest things I tell my customers is that they need to watch their game tape. Every NFL quarterback watches themselves perform after every game and critiques how they played the prior Sunday. If you're willing to be vulnerable and honest with yourself, that's going to set you apart from the rest of the pack as a guest and a host. Make a playlist in Spotify of all the shows you've ever appeared on if you're a guest, and take a bit of time after you've made those appearances to listen to the episode. Sit down with a drink and take at it. Listen to how you talk. How do you ask questions? Find the better ifs and how you could rephrase things. What questions did you answer flatly? And what questions did you answer with an actual good story? You should start a podcast if you're committed to promotion. There's a great question about this just a moment ago. Not occasionally, not consistently. I used to joke to people, since I started a podcast, I would introduce myself. Hi, I'm Robb. I have a podcast. You got to get that way. Hi, I'm Robb. I guest on podcasts. The start-stop cycle for hosts of inconsistency is murder on your audience. And the same thing, too, for yourself on social media. If you're a guest, if you're inconsistent on what's going on, they rely on that to build a relationship with you. Many platforms out there reward consistency in publishing as well. Start a podcast if you want to build relationships with people in your industry through natural chemistry of interviews. Trade shows are expensive, as are industry events. And the connectedness of our world makes for some incredible leverage when it comes to meeting people in a very personal way. Lastly, start a podcast if you want AI discoverability. Long-form audio and video indexed with their transcripts via answer engine optimization is increasingly how people are finding experts. It's actually how I just got onto I'm getting onto a show about that car I was talking about here, and we're having a conversation about it next week. It's wild. Don't start a podcast if you're looking for quick leads. This is not a quick lead channel. Most shows I have a 9 to 12 month cycle for their first financially beneficial relationship to appear. That is the appearance, not the close. Don't start a show if you're not going to market with what you create. A podcast that nobody knows about is just a journal with a microphone. Now, that can be healthy for some people, but if you want to learn more about you or want people to learn more about you, you've got to put it out there. Do not start a podcast if you want vanity metrics. If your thought is, oh, I want to go viral, you need to take a step back right now. Download counts can look impressive, but if they don't convert into anything, they are literally worthless internet points. I'd rather have a hyper-engaged audience of 100 people that hang on my every word. They share my content, and if I had an audience that was 100 times bigger who didn't do any of that, they would be worth less than the 100. And last but not least, don't start a podcast if you're not willing to refine your message. The best podcasters iterate constantly. So do the best guests. If you treat it like a set it and forget it, it's going to die. All right. We have covered a ton of ground today, and hey, I'm actually on time, which is great. What we've learned is in 2026, knowledge is cheap. Wisdom is rare. And the way that you're able to share wisdom in a way that people resonate with, whether you host a show or whether you're guesting on other people's shows, or whether you're still figuring out if any of this belongs in your strategy at all, this all comes down to the same thing. Real stories, real voices, real people who show up prepared, and respecting the people who give you a platform to show up. So here's the bottom line and the key takeaways for each of the three groups here. If you have a show, go find your superfans. Niche down harder than you think you should, and be strategic about who you bring on as guest, not just to make a content machine. Group 2, if you want to guest more, figure out your ELO. Pitch shows you can constantly and actually win. Ask about how you can promote things for them after the fact. Show up in their social media posts and treat hosts like a partner, not just a place that you go to get recorded. And lastly, if you're deciding that this is something you should even touch in 2026, use what you heard today to determine if this is the best use of your time. And if it isn't, I probably just saved you a bunch of time, effort, money, and heartache. So before I go, I want to mention something very quickly because it is relevant to all of what we talked about. A lot of what we covered today, the ELO ladder, the story framework, how to position your pitch for specific shows, how to map your ICP to the right targets, that is exactly what my podcast pitch lab is built around. It's not a booking service. It's not a spray and pray machine. It is for people who want to raise their guest ELO intentionally instead of hoping that they kind of just improve over time. If that sounds like something you need, you're in luck. Everybody today is going to receive the intro to our podcast pitch lab course emailed to them in the follow-up email, which I believe is coming tomorrow from this webinar. It's a fabulous deeper dive into more of these concepts. And I actually added an extra module to it on the free part, which is great. And then lastly, once you work through those freebie modules, and if you feel like you need to scratch that itch some more, we'd invite you to grab the rest of the course because, it's incredibly useful. And because this economy is really strange right now, use that code DIVEBARS0326 at checkout, knock things down another 15% for you as a thank you for being here. And the best part is that when you take that plunge and unlock the whole of the podcast pitch lab, everything is backed by our 100% bulletproof guarantee, because if you don't love it, I will refund you every cent, even the credit card swipe fee. So that's it, folks. Hey, we are on time. Have a great rest of your week. I'm going to be hanging out here with the back end crew to answer a few more questions. And of course, feel free to grab some time on my calendar, which Bernie has been so kind to link there in the chat. Look for the email tomorrow with all the stuff that we've talked about today. And of course, there will be a replay of this webinar. I'm going to get it up on YouTube as fast as I can. And by all means, please join us for our next one on April 22nd, where we'll be talking about podcast presence that converts. Why how you show up on the right podcast matters more than you think.
All right, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much for joining.
Take care, folks. Thanks again for coming in.
Hang out if you have any extra questions.
Most definitely.